And next speaker is from United States of America, and Dr. Benison sir will introduce the resource person. And I just hand over the section to Risha to introduce the moderator of this section, Dr. Benison sir.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. Thank you very much. I must record a word of thanks to Dr. Kairul also. I was also listening to him right from the beginning, of course. When I was listening to him, he was talking about so many things. What is, why, how, and where soft skills ought to be applied, and why we fail in certain things, and so many things he was covering up. Thank you, Dr. Kairul. I was listening from my side. Thank you so much. Now, it's a pleasure to invite and welcome Dr. Carla Lawyer. Welcome, Dr. Carla. Welcome. Hearty welcome to you. On behalf of the organizers and the participants, I'm happy to invite you and welcome you. Friends, she is an assistant professor of educational leadership in the College of Education, Nursing, and Health Professions at the University of Hartford in Connecticut, US. She is a higher education faculty member with more than 25 years of teaching experience and also handling the issues that are related to post-secondary systems, curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, and organizational administration. Dr. Loya has her PhD in higher education from the Pennsylvania State University and a Master of Science in Higher Education Administration from the University of Kansas. Her research comprises three interwoven areas that investigate how the social identities of students and faculty shape and are shaped by their experiences in higher education environments to then inform decision making. This is a very important aspect, and this is a very important field. So decision making that leads to more inclusive colleges and universities. Faculty and student experiences and the role of identity, social justice, and equity in those experiences. And then her expertise in college teaching and learning, and then research methods and assessment. They all will certainly add more beauty to your presentation. I'm so hopeful of that. Dr. Loya supervises doctoral dissertations and teaches doctoral courses on instructional development, professorate, research methods, and dissertation preparation courses. She has presented her research at national and international educational conferences, including the American Educational Research Association, Association for Study of Higher Education, and the Association of American Colleges and Universities. Her scholarship has been published in top peer-reviewed journals and by prestigious academic publishers in education. Dr. Loya is a co-editor of a New Directions for Institutional Research book, or using qualitative research to inform decision making. I have just given you just a tip of the iceberg. She is, what I understand from the paper that I have in my hand, is an ocean of information, an ocean of experience, and an ocean of knowledge in her field. I'm sure that she will entertain us, she will edutain us, and she will throw light on the most important aspect in teaching, learning areas. Welcome you, Dr. Laila, again. We are very eager to listen to you. Please, it's your time now.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. We're going to have enough time for questions, I hope, at the end. And what I am looking forward to present in how to develop teaching philosophies that lead to more inclusive ways of teaching and learning. And increasingly, we've been asked when we apply for jobs anywhere in the world, we've been asked to write teaching philosophy statements. So what I'm proposing today is how do we pause and think about what we believe about teaching and learning, how we develop that teaching philosophy first to then be able to write the statement. So let me try something here and see if it works. what I would like is to ask any of you who feel comfortable enough to jump in and tell me what comes to mind when you think of inclusive classrooms. Anyone? On the chat or by speaking? What do you think when you hear inclusive classrooms? Who's going to be the brave first person? Jump
Hi,
in.
Dr. Carla. Is it students with special needs joining into the mainstream?
It could be. What else? I see a raised hand.
Yes, students from different backgrounds, different social backgrounds, someone from the marginalized section, someone from the upper section, and other.
Perfect. We have 2 answers. Who else?
Dr.
On
Loya,
the chat, on the chat, I see
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Loya. When the participants interact with us, let them introduce themselves first and then come into their part.
My apologies.
No need to apologize. Of course, this is just a suggestion.
Absolutely.
Dear participants,
You help me. You're here to help me. I thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I also see on the chat that every person is a participant irrespective of their position or station, interactive. So yes, we are all thinking in very similar ways about what I am going to be talking about. So I'm going to start sharing my presentation and then we'll come back to talking to one another. Let's start by having a definition of inclusive teaching and learning. And I'm using Christine Hawkins's definition that says that when we are inclusive educators is when we plan and design and implement our teaching, our instruction in ways that every component from the pedagogy, the curriculum, and the assessments, all of it are meant to bring meaningful, relevant, and accessible learning environments to everyone. And this is something that at the beginning you were all sharing with me, how inclusive learning is about being attuned, being aware, being respectful, being welcoming of every person in our classrooms. Inclusive teaching and learning also means that we see each individual that enters our classrooms, whether they are virtual or in person, as people who bring their own backgrounds, their own differences, their own beings, and that difference is not only good, but is the source of enrichment, that their diversity makes our lives and our learning richer for everybody. If we go to the next slide, we will see that when we're thinking about doing inclusive teaching and learning, there are many areas where we can make changes. These are just only a few. We can create more inclusive classrooms in our syllabus, in our programs, in our curriculum, in our pedagogies, the actual ways in which we teach, in our assessments, including the assignments, but also in every interaction and communication we have with our students. Now, before we get to the actual changes, in the next slide, I would like to propose that before we launch into action, in the next slide, before we launch into any changes, because that's our first instinct, we always want to say, what can I change? How can I just adjust something? Those changes will not be as powerful, will not be as meaningful, will not be as coherent as if we first, go to the next slide, please. If we first reflect. We need to pause, we need to stop, we need to think about what we believe, what we care about first before we enact teaching changes. So this is the title of my presentation, Inclusive Teaching Philosophies. And it means that we need to first think about of the different ways we're already being inclusive educators that we might not even be aware of, to then think, what else can I do and what is it that I am about? If we go to the next slide, teaching philosophies are the beliefs and values that guide our teaching. Is what we believe and what we value about teaching and learning. But it is also, it's not only the beliefs in the abstract, it's not only the ideas, but also the specific ways in which we implement those values and those beliefs in our classrooms. It is how we enact them in our practice. And I am proposing that, like philosophical paradigms, like these huge ways of thinking, we treat teaching philosophies the same way, as a set of beliefs that should always guide our action. So we cannot have action without that background of beliefs and values. If we go to the next slide, a paradigm, a philosophical paradigm, which is this big shift in the way we think about things, has these 4 philosophical components. I am proposing that these 4 pieces should be part of our teaching philosophies, meaning the ways in which we reflect about what we care about when we think about teaching and learning. So that once we are reflective enough, we can then become practical educators that enact the inclusive teaching and learning. And I will be sharing my paper with all of you. I have a short paper in which I expand all these ideas. But in the next few slides, I'm going to be presenting these 4 elements and how we use them to guide our teaching philosophies. So the next slide presents the first of the 4 elements, philosophical elements, is ontology. And don't feel nervous if these terms are new to you. All ontology means is reality. Ontology refers to how we, each of us, see the world. That's why we have a lens on the slide. How we see the world. Some of us see the world one way, some of us see the world slightly different. And ontology means not only what we see around us, but how we interpret. What values do we mean to those elements in our world? In the next slide, I connect ontology to the instructional component. So from an ontological viewpoint, it means that we as educators, we need to see ourselves as instructors, but also see every student that enters our classrooms as individuals that are not generic. They're just not one number. They're just not one more person in our seats. They are individuals with social identities, with backgrounds, with prior knowledge. Some of them have taken courses in the same topics we're teaching. Some of them have skills, have practice from their jobs, have practice from their experiences. They have strengths. They also face challenges. They have specific needs. One person at the beginning mentioned people with different abilities. Well, it doesn't mean only people with different abilities. It means all of us. We have different needs when we enter a classroom, including this presentation. Each one of you came looking for a specific thing, different thing, right? And we need to be attuned of the subjectivities and goals that might come into the classroom from each learner. And then we take all of these components when we are planning and later on when we're teaching and when we're assessing both our teaching and our student learning. In the next slide, I propose that each of us think about these questions to think of way to see the world more inclusively as educators. How do we see our classrooms more inclusively? So one question is, who am I as an instructor? In the previous presentation, I got to see about how to manage classrooms. And we got to see that there are many different ways to do this. You can be controlling, you can be disciplining, you can be guiding, you can be facilitating. So what are our roles as instructors in our classrooms? Who are our students? And what about them, if anything, should we know and should we consider when we are including readings, when we're including assignments, when we are assessing, right, when we're teaching? And how can we create those classrooms, whether virtual or whether in person? How can we create classrooms where every learner feels that they can participate, that they can be engaged? We tend to have students who are very comfortable, who are very, to talkative, who participate a lot, who raise their hands a lot, who are engaged. And then we have students who are not. How do we create the classrooms where everybody finds different ways to be part of the teaching and learning? And then how can I teach and assess in ways that different ways of knowing and different ways of participating and different ways of interacting are valued? So that's the first element. Going on to the second element on the next slide, we see epistemology. And epistemology, all it means, in the next slide, all it means is in epistemology, we need to think about knowledge. Epistemology means knowledge. If we can go to the next slide, is knowledge and what we as instructors accept as good knowledge. How is it created? Is it created only by the instructor, or can it be created by the student? And who is allowed to do it, right? In the next slide, we can see that instructionally, we need to take into account all the different ways, all the different types, all the different formats in which our content enters the curriculum. Of course, when we're planning, we're choosing our content. Sometimes we choose a textbook, we choose articles, but oftentimes we can give the opportunity through student presentations, student teamwork, different ways of bringing other content that resonates with each learner, that brings their own interest into the conversation that happens in the classroom. We also should question who and what we are including when we're making those content decisions, but importantly, who and what we are excluding. Because sometimes we're not aware that we have omitted things in our classrooms, and our students will feel it if they're part of that omitted group. We should also have different and varied ways for students to acquire what we're trying to teach them and to demonstrate it back to us. When we're assessing them, we should give them different ways of demonstrating it. And this has to do with our pedagogies and assessments. And lastly, this is important, we need to see our students not only as receptacles, not only as recipients. We need to see our students as capable to also create knowledge with us. We also need to be humble and recognize that we can learn from one another. In the next slide, we have some questions to promote epistemological reflection towards more inclusive teaching philosophies. One question is, we need to ask, is the content we are choosing when we plan our courses representative of most or all students in our rooms? Are we leaving someone out of this conversation? Are all our students expected to, and they know that they're expected to, and then given the opportunity, given the space, given the option to be part of the receiving and creating of knowledge? And lastly, are all our components, like we talked at the beginning, our pedagogies, our activities, our assignments, our assessments, varied and flexible enough, especially during a pandemic where we are having to be super flexible? Are we flexible enough in all these elements to let them demonstrate their ways of knowing? So that's the second element. The third element on the next slide is axiology. And axiology, all it means is values and ethics. I'm sorry for the flashing. And it has to do instructionally with what we value in teaching and learning. So what do we consider important? What do we consider valuable? In the next slide, we see that instructionally, axiology has to do with our what we consider important. Is we need to think about issues of power, privilege, difference. Some of us want to be objective. Some of us allow ourselves to be subjective. Why? Let's think a bit more about what does it mean to be objective and how does that perhaps affect some of our students negatively, right? And importantly, we are in charge of our classrooms. We're responsible for creating teaching and learning, but how do we use and not abuse power dynamics in the classroom? How do we help the students who are quiet to have a voice? And how do we help our students who are talking perhaps too much to stop and leave space for those who need to jump in, right? The next slide shows us some questions to reflect on our beliefs and values in instruction. So we need to think in the first bullet, we need to think how we as instructors have our values, and in the next bullet, our students' values. How are we considering our values and our students' values part of the teaching and learning that come in the classroom or not? Should we or should we not? This is a decision each of us has to make depending on our schools, our courses, our way of teaching. We need to decide whether these things are important in our classrooms or not, and whether we're allowed to have them or not. And if so, how do we bring them in? And then if we decide to have classrooms where everybody participates, are we giving our students the opportunities to be part of it? Or are we just saying it, but are we not giving them that space? And lastly, we as instructors have more authority. We're the ones teaching, we're the ones grading. And so how are we using our authority as instructors to empower students to be responsible, to participate, to take ownership of their own learning to a certain point, right? So that's the third element. The next slide shows us the last element. Thank you for the chat comment. On the last slide, we have the fourth philosophical element, methodology. And this is a word perhaps all of us have heard. Methodology refers to the how. And in instruction, it means how do we transmit and how do we acquire knowledge, both as teachers and as students. The next slide moves us into thinking instructionally about methodologies, and is, of course, about the pedagogies, which is what methodology means in instruction. Is the pedagogies that we're choosing, are we having a lot of active learning? Are we having a lot of team-based work? Are we having a lot of discussion-based classrooms? Or are we lecturing? Are we just transmitting information? But it's not only the methodologies, it's not only the pedagogies, it's also all these other choices that come before we begin the teaching. It's about the content. It's about the norms and rules. It is about the assessments and the assignments that we will choose to foster learning. And so we need to be flexible enough, particularly during a pandemic again, that we need to accept different ways for students to engage. We as instructors are really, really good at reading the room in our classrooms. We immediately know if someone wants to jump in. We know if somebody's hesitating. We know if somebody's confused. We know if somebody's sleepy. So we need to be very flexible and change and interact differently. In the next slide, we have some questions to foster methodological reflection towards more inclusive teaching philosophies. In the next one, we have a question about whether we as instructors are choosing pedagogies that allow us to create a supportive environment where everybody can participate. And it includes not only the specific techniques and strategies, but the activities, the assignments, the assessments. And then we need to question whether our pedagogies and our decisions are empowering the students to be engaged. Or are we silencing some of them? Or are we letting some of them be quiet? Do my pedagogies recognize and incorporate our students' experiences and needs? Do they respond to them? Do I provide multiple and different ways for students to jump in, to chat, to talk, to listen, to interact with one another, to interact quietly sometimes? And then how can we gauge as instructors, how can we find ways to collect feedback intentionally or informally about whether we are empowering the students? Sometimes we need to ask a question anonymously. Sometimes we need to ask them to email us. Sometimes we need to meet with them, right? So this is the last of the four. Next slide, please. The last of the four. I don't know if this is going to work, so we're going to try it. I want to invite you to do what I'm telling you we should be doing in our classrooms. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I will invite you to think for a second by yourselves about these four elements that I've been talking about: ontology or reality, epistemology or knowledge, axiology or values, methodology or pedagogies. Think of one, pick one, just one. Let's say that you're only picking pedagogies or methodologies, or you're only picking knowledge or epistemology. So then think about if you were to change the way you see that one element you chose, if you were to change something about your epistemology, if you were to change something about your axiology, how will that translate in your classrooms? What little change could you make after this presentation today in your classrooms, in your teaching, to help your students engage more, to be more inclusive? And then I give you a few options at the bottom of that slide where you could make that change. You can make your change in your syllabus. You can make your change in your curriculum, in your content. You can make that change in your pedagogies, or you can make that change in your communication with learners. And so think for a little bit. Pick one. You don't have to do all of them. Just one of the elements from the top and one of the elements from the bottom. And when you're ready, share your insight in the chat, please. I'm going to be reading them. If you were to change one thing after this presentation to be more inclusive in the way you see teaching and learning, who's going to put the first example in the chat? So I'm going to give you my example. If I were to choose axiology or values, and I will begin to think of myself as a more caring educator, because then I value more the environment that I bring to my classrooms, I might choose the syllabus to be the first place where I change my tone, the way I present myself as instructor to my learners. And maybe in the syllabus, I will use a more welcoming tone. I will avoid putting everything in bold or in caps, right? I will try to say, if you need help, please come see me during office hours. So that will be one example. I see one example here on differential learning. Who else is going to write on the chat? I'm waiting for you. Okay, somebody's asking for the site. Methodology, I see another one. Methodology is a key factor for success of excellent communication between teacher and students. Absolutely, absolutely. Our methodologies have to really, our methodologies are the ways in which the students see us, all our values, all our intents, all our planning becomes palpable in the classroom through our methodologies. So absolutely. I see another answer, ontology through pedagogy is excellent. So your values into your actual techniques, making the students to feel. Okay, so maybe your course will let you do the different activities in which you will allow your students to bring themselves in. Absolutely. Anyone else? I know this is new for some of you. You might still be thinking, what else can I do? Let me give you another example. If I were to think about epistemology and knowledge, I will do two things. In my syllabus, actually in my curriculum, I might choose my readings for many weeks, but then I will say students will present and they will choose one reading they want us to read for 1 week. And so the content allows the students to bring their own interest into the room. And then the second thing that I will do, it will be in my assessments. I will have one little assessment with very few points, so that it's not high stakes, so that it's not threatening. I will give the students a small assessment, a small assignment, maybe a 1 page in which they can write about any topic they wish related to my course. And so that way, my epistemology is about content, about letting the students choose the content they bring, but also helping the students contribute to the content that we're all learning about. right? I see another answer here on assessments, because not all students are test takers. Use other methods to assess students' understanding. Absolutely. We sometimes have to use tests too many times, too much. And there are so many other ways of assessing students' learning, formally and informally, formative and summative, high stakes and low stakes. We can have one-page essays, we can have one-minute papers, we can have presentations, we can have activities in the classroom, we can have drafts submitted for less points, we can have students create their own wikis, their own blogs, their own, now the podcasts, we can have students create little short videos or vlogs. I'm trying to catch up here on the chat because now you are all contributing and I love it. Curricula that includes overall development of students, absolutely. Sometimes we're so focused about our courses, we forget about these other larger objectives that we need to be mindful of to prepare global learners. Our students are coming from all over the world increasingly. So definitely we need to have overall development. Another answer is epistemological help in critical thinking, related to what we were just talking about. So we need to think more broadly about how we are educating our students. Another one says axiology, improve moral in education. Absolutely. These are, now you're talking, you're leading me towards all these other elements that are important and should be part of all our classrooms. And oftentimes we forget about because we're so focused on our content and our semesters and our academic years. And we need to cover content, and these things are important and have to come into our rooms. Another one says methodology is the important factor in the teaching and learning process. To impart knowledge in the classroom, teaching method plays important part for students of various backgrounds. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's about this attunement. Once we start seeing things more inclusively, the ideas will continue flowing. I hope you will feel it. Another one says, assessment tell us about the outcomes. Yes, and we need to be careful. What outcomes are we choosing? And are they the only outcomes that we should be choosing? Can we make more? Can we open the room? Can we let other things like the ones that you all have been commenting on come and be part in our assessments? Another one says, the purpose of education is to make the students understand reality through the knowledge they have gained based on values. Absolutely. So you are all getting this idea about how we need to open our rooms and let other aspects come in. I love this. I'm going to share my paper on the chat. So if any of you wants to read a short piece, is there, please click on the link, because once we finish the session, it might go away. You are also requested to give some aspects of motivation on students. Absolutely. This is part of being a more caring educator. Ontology will determine the 5 main components: syllabus, curricula, pedagogies, assessments, and communication. Absolutely. Our realities have to do with all of this. Thank you for pointing that out, because it really is about changing our ontology, and the other components are part of it. Absolutely. You got me right to the point. All 4 elements of philosophy are important in the teaching and learning process. Pedagogical content knowledge is the key in teaching and learning. Absolutely. I love all these comments. So if we go to the next slide, please. If we go to the next slide. So we can return now to the actual specific places where we can make our changes. So I invite you to read more about these things. I have a specific comments in my paper, but basically we cannot make changes only on one aspect. Like it was said in here before, ontology determines all of it. But the same way, pedagogy is not the only place where we need to make changes. It does not mean you put one activity today and you're done. It does not mean that. It means we need to think about our reality, our ontology, how every component of our classrooms, from the tone and the content and the strategies and the assignments and the values and points we give and the way we communicate to our learners, all of these components have to be attuned. If they have to reflect how you see the world, what values you bring into them and into your classroom, and how do you then enact them. So in the last slide, the next one, I would like to start closing because I'm mindful of time and I don't want to get into the next presenter's time. I invite you to reflect, to pause. We're busy, we're so busy. And now with pandemic, we're teaching so much, we're having long hours in our days, but we need to pause, we need to stop, we need to give ourselves time to reflect every once in a while, every few months, every year, reflect about how do we, as instructors, have the responsibility, the important role of creating inclusive environments for teaching and learning. And so all these are a few ideas. I'm sure you have way more ideas. So we have about 3 minutes in case there are any questions from any of you, either on the chat or by jumping in. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We can stop sharing now.
Yeah, Dr. Carla, thank you very much. Let's wait for a few minutes or let's see if someone comes out with any question.
I'm seeing some comments on the chat. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Carla. Hello?
Yes,
can you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Professor Gobala from University of Malaysia, Kelantan, Malaysia. A little bit introduction. My university is an entrepreneurship university. Yeah? We are specialized on entrepreneurship education. And I came from, before that, I was in school, high school teacher. I teach Form 5. Form 5 means O level to A level. And later I moved to university, which is I'm teaching from first year to the final year. And of course, now I'm got student until PhD. So I think the 4 components that you are teaching, you are introduced to us, ontology, epistemology, and the methodology is very basic, fundamental before anyone to embarking in the research and so on. But what I ask from you, you see in classroom, there are different levels of students, right? And always the teacher only focus the best one. That's the reality. Reality is they're only looking for the best one. And the one weak, and the one is like a lot of students, as we say, they are coming from a very poor background, family background, economically not strong. And I was instructor also. I was go and observe the classroom because I was assigned to do the teachers to observation in class. And also the teachers, they only focus on the best. And 2-3 students sleeping. And after finish, I called the teachers, what they have done in the class. And then they didn't realize that the student was sleeping. And I go back to the student at the back of them. I say, hello, what happened to you? And the student said to me, sir, I didn't eat in the morning. I'm very poor. See, the student is sleeping because the reason that is a reality that you're talking about epistemology. So when as a teacher, I'm not looking at the one narrow-minded but holistic. I care for students who are coming from the background. The good one always the best one, doesn't matter. Because the good one always can go in front line. But the back one always the teacher bypass. That's why a lot of students, the back one, go on the different part of the life. But in my own experience, I want to ask you, what is your advice to all of teachers, regardless at the university, colleges, or the school, if they bypass the one at the back, and in my own experience, I taking care of the back one, today they become engineers, today they become entrepreneur. I saw very proud because you know why? I care everyone as holistic, regardless race, regardless ethnicity, and so on. I don't care. Okay, I take them as my own children, my own relative. So this doesn't happen in many ways. A lot of teachers don't have this kind of passion. They are just go there, finish syllabus. That's it. They go more syllabus rather than go to value. And you was mentioned. There's no communication take part. after the class, before the class. So I want to see from your experience, from
Thank
your
you.
research, and how you, from the United States perspective, that we can learn from you in Asian perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And your question is similar to one that I see on the chat, that sometimes despite what we as instructors are doing, our students sometimes are not engaging, are not learning, and sometimes they fail. I do strongly believe that we enter education, we are educators because we care, because we want to help all our students, and we cannot forget that. And so I also believe that when we assess, we cannot only assess our students. When we're evaluating, we're not only passing or failing our students, we need to evaluate and assess ourselves. We need to fail or pass ourselves as instructors. So if one of our students is failing, I believe we failed. I believe it's time to stop and say, what else can I do? What could I have done? What other options should I be thinking of in my pedagogies, in my assessments, in my activities, in my assignments? Perhaps it's a sign that what we've been doing is no longer working. And again, and this is not only from a US perspective, but increasingly we are having opportunities to have learners from different parts of the world, from different cultures. And we're having the opportunity to go and teach people from different parts of the world. And so we need to have this reciprocity and eagerness. We instructors need to be curious learners ourselves. And so we need to let our students teach us a few things too. Talk about their own worlds, their own backgrounds. And in terms of what can we do when we see a teacher not doing their job, I think it is a responsibility to jump in and say something like you did. But also when we are instructors and we know deep down we lost a few students, it is an opportunity to do different the next time, to do better. So my slides, I have already shared them with the admin in the group. So I'm happy if they are distributed to anyone who wants them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a minute before we say thank you very much. I would like to record a few things here. When I was listening to you, I was suddenly reminded of Shakespeare. In one of his famous plays, Hamlet, the character Polonius says, "Brevity is the soul of wit." I was very closely watching you from my side and I was enjoying your presentation. I know that it is a very rare combination of scholarship with the talent of teaching. Your students must be very, very fortunate to listen to you because I believe that you are the one who practices and teaches what you practice. Ontology, epistemology, axiology, methodology, all logies will certainly add beauty to the presentation. They have added beauty to the presentation. And also to the participants, I would say that they would not have any second opinion if I say in one word, excellent. Excellent it was. So thank you very much, Carla Lawyer. Thank you for being with us. Hope to meet you again and again. I must also record big thanks to the organizers, the Lavender Club. Yeah, we must clap and we must appreciate them for this wonderful opportunity.